Everyone, welcome into the Basketball Podcast of Mid-America. Today is Thursday, January 18th, and boy, we have a lot to talk about since the last time we sat down and talked. I'm Ethan Westerman, happy to be joined by Bob Holt of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, and then we've got Blake Sutton. He's back there running the board.
What up?
Last time we sat down, Arkansas was fresh off a loss at Georgia, where they showed a little bit of fight, but you still had a lot of worries. And then, boy, Saturday rolls around and it got ugly down in Gainesville. I think that's probably a nice way to say how that game went. But then they turn around and they face Texas A&M a few days later here in Fayetteville, and Tramon Mark hits a game winner with just a little bit over a second left, a little runner down the lane to defeat Texas A&M 78-77. And my goodness, Bob, they needed that shot, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, that would have been a brutal loss for the capital B. They played so well for most of the game. They'd gotten a 20-point lead in the first half. I certainly didn't expect, Arkansas to win the game by 20, but I thought they'd maintain control. And you got to give A&M credit. They've got a lot of veteran players and guys that have been through it and have experienced wins over Arkansas. And Wade Taylor just kind of went off in that second half and had 29 and brought them back and hit a pretty crazy off-balance three to give them the lead. Their first lead of the game's 77-76 with just over 7 seconds left. And you're thinking, wow, this is going to be – if Arkansas doesn't come up with something here at the end, this is just going to be, a horrible loss. And, Tramon Mark made a great play. And really, Arkansas, I thought the Aggies helped them out. I wasn't aware of this. Arkansas had to call timeout with about 28 seconds left when Trevor Brazil couldn't get the ball inbounds down on the baseline. And so that was a smart timeout because you don't want to turn the ball over. But they were out of timeouts after Wade Taylor hit that shot. And Eric said the timeout that A&M took, Buzz Williams is a great coach, but that timeout helped out Arkansas. And he might have said, well, I want to get my defense set. But so Arkansas was able to figure out, Eric said on the radio, they didn't even know if they were who would inbound the ball, probably should have grabbed it. And then you're in scramble mode. And, of course, the defense didn't set either, but they figured out, spread the floor, get the ball to Tramon, let him go make a play. That was crash the boards. And A&M, I thought, gave token pressure, let him get, like Tramon said, he got up ahead of steam, and he drove, and it was not an easy shot. It may have been 5-6 feet or whatever, but it was not an easy shot. And I get A&M didn't want to foul him. And a lot of times you watch games in that situation and a guy's able to get all the way to the hole because teams are so cognizant of not fouling. But I would have doubled, tripled, quadrupled, whatever it took to get the ball out of his hands and make somebody else beat you, not the guy that scored 33 points up to that point and was very, very efficient. And so just like if it had been the other way around, if I was Arkansas, I would have made sure anybody but Wade Taylor took the shot. And I know he got off the shot at the end, but there were two guys on him, and he was leaning in, and I don't know how the whole thing went in, but it did. And so, it was a huge win for Arkansas. I don't know if it's going to turn their season around. I'm pretty convinced if they lost that game that their season would essentially be over. Even just 4 games in the SEC, I think that just would have been not just a loss, but to lose a 20-point lead at home, it would have been so brutal. I just don't know if they could have recovered from it. And they've obviously got a lot of work to do, but they've got a winnable game now. It's against South Carolina at home. And so let's see what they can do. But, yeah, that was a must win.
Yeah, and if anything, I think it gave the team a pulse again. Like, that's what they really needed. I mean, just after the way those first 3 SEC games went, I mean, the best they looked in SEC play up till the A&M game was a 10-point loss at Georgia. Like, that's just not very encouraging, considering you got blown out at home by Auburn, worst loss in Bud Walton Arena history. You go down to Florida, and it's kind of the same old thing you saw against Auburn with just lack of competitiveness. At a lot of spurts during that game, it just felt like maybe some of the guys weren't as having that want to that you need to have in SEC play. They come out firing against Texas A&M. That lead they built up in the first half, I mean, proved to be the difference. I mean, A&M just kind of dug themselves a hole that they finally clawed out of with that Wade Taylor 3 at the end. But, I mean, if they hadn't fallen down that much early, they wouldn't have had to, exhaust all that, emotional energy just to even get back in it. But huge shot from Tramon Mark to lift Arkansas to a win. I was surprised that, like you said, like they just let him get the ball in so easily. I would have thought, if anything, just kind of deny him the inbound. And if they get it back into Tramon Mark's hands, it means they probably took off quite a few seconds off the clock, having to go the distance. So huge game from Tramon Mark. Like you mentioned, kind of just the way A&M was playing, it kind of felt like they just were concerned about not fouling. It was a whistle fest in Bud Walton Arena on Tuesday night. Blake, do you like whistles as much as, I feel like anybody who loved whistles would have had a great time on Tuesday night.
Yeah, I saw something on Twitter. It was like with 10 minutes left in the game, they'd already hit the 2-hour mark. It ended up being like a over 2.5 hour game. Doug Shows was one of the refs. I feel like Arkansas gets him a lot, and yeah, his crew seems to blow a lot of whistles. And I think his crew was also reffing the Auburn game. And that one had like 2 reviews within the first couple minutes, and same deal, yeah, tons of whistles. But it's interesting that, yeah, I think since you were talking about, Bob was talking about wanting to get the ball out of Tramon Mark's hands. I think since he had the ball, and I think Mark was like 17 of 22 from the line. I think they were pretty spooked about fouling him as well. So, yeah, just. Incredible play by Tramon Mark. What a shot. And it hit nothing but the net. He was kind of off balance. And, I mean, in that moment, it was just incredible. And Arkansas is lucky that – they're just lucky to have a guy like Tramon Mark on the team right now when kind of seemed like all hope was lost. He comes out and has 35 points and a game winner, almost a buzzer beater. So, like Bob was also saying, don't know if this is going to – turn Arkansas's season around, but it would have been really disastrous if they had dropped this one.
Yeah, Tramon Mark and Wade Taylor put on a show. I mean, the two combined I'm not a good math guy, but 35 plus 41, that's 76 points between two guys in one ball game. Really, really incredible stuff by Wade Taylor. They struggled. Texas A&M did, especially in the first half offensively, and it felt like he was. In the early goings, he was their only hope to score. And then in the second half, he just turned into Superman for them. He was just, you look at the end of the game, he's 13 of 32, not as efficient as Mark was, 8 of 15, and like we said, got to the line a lot. So Wade Taylor wasn't, that efficient, but boy, he got it done in ways that, it was just timely buckets. It was big buckets. It was tough ones. The last one he made, that was... like you said, Bob, that was just the way that he made that shot and everything. That would have been disastrous for Arkansas for that to just kind of be a dagger after you'd built a big lead. But Tramon Mark goes down, hits the game winner, and it was not his first one. You wrote about this. Talk about, I guess, that first go-around that Tramon Mark had with a buzzer beater in college.
Yeah, somebody asked him after the game, have you hit some other game-winning shots? He said, well, in high school. And then I don't know if he'd forgotten, but he said, oh, yeah, when I was a freshman. And then L. Ellis, who was sitting next to him, said, was that the half-court shot? And he goes, yeah, that was a half-court shot. And then I said, well, that doesn't count, meaning, you're just kind of throwing it up there and hoping it goes in. I assume that's what he meant. And Mark was like, hey, it won the game. It counts. And but, yeah, if you Google it on video, it's pretty easy to find video of it. Just Tramon Mark, he's a fourth-year junior. This is his fourth year in college, but he is a junior eligibility-wise. And when he was a true freshman at Houston, they had an excellent team like Calvin Sampson always does. And they were playing Memphis. You got to remember this is back in the good old AAC days before Houston was in the Big 12 this year. And so the score's tied 64 all. There's 1.7 seconds left. Marcus Sasser, if people remember him, he was an excellent player at Houston. I don't know why he wasn't getting the ball, but maybe it's because he was such a good passer. But he inbounds the ball. Tramon catches it about half-court turns, kind of goes through a couple Memphis players who I'm sure, again, were very cognizant of not fouling him, and he lofts it, and it goes off the backboard and goes in. Just beats the buzzer, and, the players all mob him and are knocking him down. The crowd's going crazy. And, Houston wins 67-64 because it was a three. But to me, that shot he hit the other day, well, number one was bigger because it was a game winner. And obviously it was about 40 feet. He dribbled inside, but his back foot's real close to logo. I talked to a Houston writer who covers the team, and he said, hey, yeah, 40 feet sounds about right. And so, but if he misses that shot, then it goes to overtime. And Houston's ranked number 9. They're having a great year. They're going to be a high NCAA tournament. See, they're a lock, obviously. They're playing for seeding. Arkansas, I don't know if they can right the ship enough to get back to the NCAA tournament, but I am, like I say, well, like we've talked, we're pretty convinced if they lost that game, all hope would have been lost. So that was a much bigger win that Arkansas desperately needed, and it was a game-winning shot. If he doesn't hit it, that they lose the game. So, and the degree of difficulty was pretty hard, although the A&M made it easier on them, that's for sure. But it was not an easy shot by any stretch of the imagination. So, yeah, that's pretty cool, kind of some bookend. And he may have some other ones in him, too. I think Arkansas is going to be playing some more close games.
Yeah. It was funny how he just kind of shrugged off that, if I make that game winner, if I'm Tramon Mark, I'm owning that. That was an awesome shot. I mean, epic reaction from the team. But it was almost like he was shy to tell us that happened, or L. Ellis at least was trying to make him feel like it shouldn't have counted. But like you said, the magnitude of that shot, it's really, we don't know if Arkansas is going to right the ship entirely and make it to the NCAA tournament. They dug themselves a real big metrics hole, honestly, just with as far as the NCAA net ranking and everything goes, entering conference play, and the 0-3 start just dropped them further. So it's a huge hole to crawl out of. I wrote on it not long ago that if Arkansas is to turn this thing around and make it to the NCAA tournament, it would be the most improbable one yet under Musselman, just from looking at it from a metric standpoint. Like they would actually, I think, be the most improbable at this point of any team since the net era has been in existence as far as this late into January and being as low as they are. But we've seen Musselman teams turn things around. They have done it in the past, and it felt like, at least to me, on Tuesday, that game was one that, maybe at the end of the season you look back and it was just an exciting win and it didn't really mean anything toward turning things around. But it did feel like it gave the team a heartbeat again, as far as maybe a little bit of excitement. I think the word Musselman used was swagger. They were just trying to get some swagger back. Blake, I guess from your perspective, do you think that win is one that, at the end of the year, do you think we're going to be looking back and saying that was a turning point, or do you think that it was maybe just a crazy night in Bud Walton?
I don't know if it's going to be enough to turn the season around to where where Arkansas gets to the NCAA tournament, but it could just turn it around in a sense of people talking about waiting for baseball season to start and not having a super depressing basketball season. Arkansas could still, I'm not going to sit here and predict that they're going to make the NCAA tournament. They probably won't. But they could still make the NIT, and I don't think there's anything. A lot of people talk trash about the NIT, but it's postseason basketball. You get to play in Madison Square Garden. It's still fun to watch. There's nothing wrong with that. And possibly they look back on this game and consider it a turning point in the sense that the season wasn't a total loss. I just don't think it's going to be enough to springboard them into winning 10 of their next 12 games or anything like that.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of red flags still, considering giving up as big of a lead as they did. But it did feel like, the team might have gotten just a little bit of that, like Musselman said, that swagger back. And talking about turning points, though, I want to backtrack a little. I think that the second half, if we're going to go look back at the end of the year, if they do the Musselman thing and they turn this thing around, or even if, like Blake said, they just have a decent season and not a terrible one like it kind of looked like they may be having, that second half at Florida, whenever Eric Musselman played in the first half a little bit, Layden Blocker and Joseph Pinion, they switched to a zone, and Arkansas actually showed some life during those moments. So they got within, I think, 10 points at one point, which it had been ugly. I think Florida went on a 22-0 or 23, some huge run to take a big lead, but they pulled within 10 with these guys playing really hard off the bench. Musselman went back to his starters to start the second half, and the lead ballooned again. And then he put those two back in, Blocker and Pinion, and they were playing the rest of the game pretty much. It was it felt to me like a message, like, hey, if you guys that have been, carrying these heavy minutes aren't going to play as hard as other guys, I'm not going to sacrifice, effort for maybe talent. Or I don't want to say that Joseph Pinion and Layden Blocker aren't talented. They certainly are. But, these guys that had been, logging a lot of the minutes that had earned those, I guess, early in the season, Bob, we talked about this a little bit the other day. It feels like that might have been maybe a wake-up call a little bit to some of these guys.
Oh yeah, for sure. Eric, I think he was just tired of watching guys go out there and not give the kind of effort they should. And yeah, they were down. I think it was 29-10 at Florida, and then Joseph and Layden helped bring them back to some respectability, and they were at, and hey, the game was out of hand before those guys got in there, but I think they actually got within 9. Then they're down by 13 at halftime, and then it balloons again. But plus minus how much a team's outscored or outscores the opponent when guys are on the floor. I mean, with Blocker, I think they were +2, and with Joseph, they were -1, and they end up losing by 22 points. So that shows you the team was playing better when they were on the floor. Maybe Florida at that time was getting bored. I don't know, but those guys injected some life, and yeah, I do think that they served as Eric talked about this after the game. I think he had good intentions. He talked about before the game leading back in, he was going to need to get Layden and Joseph back in there, and I think Layden barely played. It was a defensive sub late in the game, and Joseph he actually got up from the bench one time. There was a timeout, and then I guess something changed. He didn't go in, but I think Eric had good intentions to play them, but he went with the older starters because A&M has an older team, and the team always had off to a great start. So at that point, I don't think he wanted to mess with the rotation. But who knows what roles guys will have moving forward. But it was kind of weird. I don't know if anybody's ever been on jury duty, but I was on jury duty several years ago, and we listened to a case, and there was an insurance company that didn't want to pay off a trucking company. And it was 2 or 3 days, and we listened to it. We were actually in deliberations, and the bailiff came in and said that the case had been settled. And you think, oh, okay, well, we don't even get to render a verdict. And believe me, we're going to hammer the insurance company. But the judge told us, hey, your time was not spent in vain. You were a very big part of this process in helping the two parties reach a settlement. And I think that if the insurance lawyers could tell how it was going, I guess lawyers can do that. And so I think in a way, Eric used the threat of the playing time for other players to get the starters to be more competitive and play harder. And they may have thought they were playing hard, but then when they realized, you know what, I played 2 minutes the other day, or I barely played. I didn't score. I better get my butting gear, or I'm not going to get to play anymore. So I think in that way, even though those guys, Layden barely played and Joseph didn't play, I think they served an important role in that A&M game, whereas that may sound just like a jury. I hope this isn't getting too weird out there, but a jury can serve a purpose in making a settlement because lawyers can see which way the wind's blowing, and it's like, well, man, I can either reach a settlement with these guys or I can wait for the jury to hammer us. I think I'm going to play it safe and reach a settlement. So, sometimes even if you're not actively involved in something, a result, you still have an impact on it.
No, certainly, and I think that's a great comparison. I think that really, had you seen Arkansas not do what they did early against Texas A&M, I mean, by far their best start to a game, and I would be willing to say all season, if not all season, in a very, very long time, their best start to a game. And I think if you hadn't seen that, had you not seen the team come out with all that energy, I think you would have gone to those two pretty quickly. I really do. I think that it was message sent, message received type of deal. And one of those guys who received the message, and we got some, a little bit of a backstory to it after the game, was L. Ellis, who was in the starting lineup. I think that just, whenever people saw his name in the starting lineup, it took you back a little bit. You're like, whoa, that's out of left field, just with kind of the way that things have been going. Bob, do you want to share, I guess, what Eric said led to that?
Well, yeah, Eric was talking about in practice, he said, okay, starting 5, get out there, 5, get out there. And he didn't name who it was. And L, who's, started earlier but had not played very much at all, jumps out there with the starters. And I get maybe all the guys did. But Eric, I think that sent a message to him that, hey, L's still engaged. He's still involved. He's not pouting. He's wants to, get a bigger role with this team. And so I think that sent a message to Eric that, hey, L's ready to play. And we didn't get to ask Elle about it because we didn't hear that straight from Eric until after the players had talked. I would love to ask Elle about it. But, he's a veteran guy. He went through a horrible year at Louisville last year, 4-28. He's got to be anxious to win and play. And, he's played JUCO ball. But, he mentioned last night he'd always played. He'd never been a guy riding the bench. And so, some guys are going to pout and just say, well, screw this or whatever. Other guys are going to hang in there and want to still contribute. And obviously, give L credit for taking the right approach. I remember Eric talking on his radio show, I don't know, a month or so ago, when they had their big turnaround a couple of years ago. Trey Wade was a guy who stepped up. He was not a flashy player, really good defensive player, tough guy. He was the guy that actually, I think, broke Eric's shoulder by accident in practice when he landed on him. And he's basically built like a linebacker. I think he actually had a tight end tryout with the Falcons or somebody, I think. And so, but I remember Eric talking about how he watched Trey's body language in practice, could tell, hey, this guy has not checked out. He's barely playing. There's a lot of games he's not playing at all, but he's engaged. He's still, very practicing hard. And so he gave Trey Wade a chance, and that was a big turning point. Even though Trey didn't put up big stats, he did against Gonzaga, and he always hammered Missouri. But and maybe L in a different way can be a guy like that, a glue guy that helps hold the team together.
Well, we're gonna wrap a bow on Texas A&M and give a little bit of a look ahead to South Carolina after a real quick break. You're listening to the Basketball Podcast of Mid-America.
Stay on top of all Arkansas Razorback sports with a Digital Plus subscription on the Hogs Illustrated app. Get complete Razorbacks coverage in one location. Your subscription gives you 20-plus issues of Hogs Illustrated magazine, the most unique and compelling coverage anywhere in the state, plus total access to all the content on WholeHogSports.com, including breaking news, commentaries, analysis, features, recruiting, award-winning photos, and premium message boards. Subscriptions start at just $17 per month. Join the Hog Sports Network team at subscribe.waco.com. That's subscribe.wehco.com. Or call 479-684-5509 to get your front row seat to Arkansas Razorback sports. Go Hogs!
Bob, I want to pick up right where we left off, talking a little bit about L. Ellis. It was something I was thinking about after the game, that he got the start. Things weren't going well, of course, up to that point, and he showed, I guess, in practice with his habits and how he practiced that he was going to be a guy you could rely on. It made me think, at Louisville, he had a pretty good year. I mean, the team didn't, but you look at what he did, and he had a pretty good year. So I guess I was kind of thinking he might just be a guy who's used to, things aren't going right, and I'm still going to play. I wonder do you think that experience at Louisville, he'd been through a really bad stretch? I mean, I think their season, you're going to compare the two with how Arkansas started an SEC play to Louisville last season. You'll still take Arkansas this year, not nearly as low of lows as Louisville got. But that was a guy who he'd been through really bad stretches and showed that he can still come out and play. Do you think that maybe any sort of his past experience with Louisville might have played into his effort the other night? He finished with 15 points, was 8 of 8 from the foul line, 6 rebounds.
Yeah, career high 6 rebounds. Eric pointed that out. And, is he 6'2"? He's not the biggest guy in the world, but A&M still beat him on the boards by 13 or 14. But A&M's the best offensive rebound team in the country, and that came into play. But, yeah, getting back to El, my guess is, you go through a 4-28 season, even though he averaged about 18 points, he put up great stats on a horrible team. And, if he wanted to keep scoring high, he could have stayed at Louisville, or he could have gone to some place where he knew he was going to be the guy. And he comes to Arkansas where, there's going to be competition for minutes, but I think he wanted to win. And, obviously Arkansas has won big under Eric Musselman and gone to back-to-back Elite Eights and a Sweet 16. And so I don't know Ellis well, limited times talking to him. I've really enjoyed it. I think he seems like a great guy and good player. But my guess is he just wants to win. And so I think that's probably why he kept a good attitude and why he wants to help these guys win and turn the season around, because he's been through the worst of Louisville in terms of win-loss, and he wants to play for a winner.
Talking about on the flip side, you have your L. Ellis who comes in, has a big game, plays well. He was, I guess, one of the guys that might have received that message at Florida that we were talking about, as far as you got to bring it. A guy who we didn't see at all the other night, and Eric Musselman said afterwards, it was a coach's decision. There wasn't any injury or anything else holding him back. Was Caleb Battle? He didn't log any minutes the other night. I guess just curious from either of you, do you think that maybe he's a guy that we see get back in it? Do we know what to expect going on there?
I was a little surprised. He only played, I think, 2 minutes at Florida. So, and he didn't play. I think he played 24 at Georgia, but didn't shoot well. He's obviously a guy you're looking for instant offense off the bench, and he's provided that most of the year. He's their number 2 scorer. I think after about 10 games, he's averaging about 17 points. Now his average is down to 12 because he hadn't scored much. But, he's an older guy. He's a senior. He, again, played on bad teams at Temple. I think he's looking to be someplace he can win. And, Eric's obviously trying to send a message to him by not even putting him in the game. I don't think Eric started off saying, well, he's not going to play. But just the way the starters were going, he probably didn't want to mess up the flow or whatever. But I do think if they're going to have a good season, they're going to need Battle to get back in the rotation because he has shown to be a guy, who can be a go-to scorer. He's a guy who can create, a guy that can get to the foul line. He's a guy, if the shot clock's running down, he can go make something happen. Tramon Mark can too, but it's nice if you can have a couple of those guys on the floor. So I do think there's a role for him. It really probably depends on how he handles this. I was kind of watching him late in the game, and he was sitting very close to the coaches, and he got up. He didn't seem to be pouting to me, seemed to be engaged in the huddles. So hopefully for Arkansas's sake and his sake, he's keeping a positive attitude about this. And I do think his name will be called again, and when it does, he needs to be ready.
Yeah, kind of on that same line of thought. Blake, do you see, we've talked a lot about, I think that's what everybody's kind of talking about after the Texas A&M game of if there could be an Arkansas turnaround. If there's going to be one, do you see any turnaround where Battle isn't, I guess, part of the mix?
Well, earlier we were talking about guys like getting the message. You got to remember, every guy on this team has a different personality, so certain coaching decisions and styles are going to work differently on different guys. And if you want to talk about guys who seemed to get the message, it was Tramon Mark. Thought Jeremiah Davenport had a really big game. Devo looked better. L. Ellis, who we've talked about, had a huge game. Chandler Lawson had some highlight plays, but then Caleb Battle doesn't play at all. So it could just be, and he's been struggling the past 5-6 games. We talked about it last week about how he was so energetic and animated in the first few games of the year, and then that kind of went that. It's almost like his attitude changed in the game, and now it's like he's not playing at all. So it could just be a situation of he's not getting the message, and it remains to be seen if he will or not. I'd like to see him be part of the mix because he was a really fun player to watch, but if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out.
Yes, and I think it's important to note that Eric Musselman, after the game, whenever asked about Battle not playing, he didn't mention anything about anything other than it was a coach's decision, and I think he said something along the line of thought of like game by game, like it could change, like it's I think he definitely left the door open of just like it might have been just this game, just kind of how things were going and the flow of the game. You build such a big lead like that, like you said, Bob. You don't really want to change much. Hard to look up and see a 30-10 lead and want to change much. But yeah, Arkansas defeats Texas A&M 78-77, sets up an important game this Saturday. Starts at noon in Fayetteville against South Carolina. A South Carolina team that before the season, I believe they were picked to finish last in the SEC, and their head coach, he started off at media day, and he wanted to make it very clear that he did not put any stock into preseason ranking.
Yeah, South Carolina's been one of the most pleasant surprises. I think they're 14-3, 2-2 in the league. Didn't play the toughest schedule, but I think their only non-conference loss was to Clemson, who's been ranked most of the year, and I think it was a road game. So if people remember, they have Michie Johnson, who's a guard, who's kind of like Wade. I'm not saying he's as good as Wade Taylor, but he's a guy that can percolate and get hot, and he's can score from all over. He transferred from Ohio State. Nowadays, a lot of these guys are on their 4th, 5th, whatever, 6th school. He's a guy that stayed there. So I like Arkansas. This is a game Arkansas needs to win at home, but South Carolina is not a gimme. They're not a team I think Arkansas is going to roll over. They've shown some fortitude, like I say, being picked last in the league, and And I remember talking to Michie Johnson at media days, and he wasn't like, all like, oh, the media sucks and they're idiots or something like that. He just said, hey, we feel we're better than that, and we're going to go out to prove it. So you got to give them credit. They didn't, again, they didn't pout, and they've had Georgia beat them the other night in Columbia, South Carolina. That was a really good win for Georgia. I think it speaks to how well Georgia's playing. Georgia almost beat Tennessee. Georgia's about that far away from being 4-0 in the league, and so. Arkansas can't look at that and say, "Oh, well, South Carolina lost at home, and so they're going to come in here and we're going to beat them." Because you think about Auburn's historically has not had much success here. A&M has not, but A&M's almost won. Auburn blew them out, and so South Carolina's probably coming in here ready to roll. And it's an early game. Sometimes you don't have a big crowd for a noon game. I think with the weather hopefully getting a little bit better, and Arkansas winning, they'll be a good crowd. And, but yeah, I think there's hope back for Arkansas. Hope for the players, hope for the coaches, hope for the fans. And so we'll see what happens. But, yeah, I think it'll be a very competitive game on Saturday.
Yeah, I think one of the most pleasant surprises actually from the other night was, none of us knew what the crowd was going to look like, with an 0-3 start to SEC play. The weather conditions, and it has been nasty up here this week with temperatures. It felt like a heat wave the first time it got up to like 17 degrees. So you just didn't know what the crowd was going to look like, and it was way more full than I would have expected. It was a great student turnout. That didn't surprise me, considering I think a lot of the students had gotten back from break, and it was probably restlessness of just want to do something. So there was a great student turnout. But overall, I thought the entire lower bowl had a good. It was filled up pretty well. So that was probably an encouraging thing for the team, just stepping into an arena and seeing you still have fans behind you. So we'll see how it turns out Sunday. But talking about on the topic of crowds, Texas A&M was fresh off a game where they had I think it was pretty packed down there for their win over Kentucky, a very emotional win, overtime win before they came to Fayetteville. We wonder if maybe that effect of that emotional high coming down from it might have set them back a little. Just it's just you got to get up for every game, and it's after you have an emotional game like that, it might have been hard. But there won't be any of that talk with South Carolina because they're coming off a loss, so they're going to come in. They're going to be really hungry, wanting to get a win.
Oh yeah, and plus Arkansas and South Carolina both played on Tuesday night, so they've had. Arkansas's had extra day to get over the high of the win. South Carolina's had an extra day to get over the disappointment. And if they could come in here and get a win, road wins are almost like 2 home wins to me. Nolan Richardson used to talk about that. They're just so precious and valuable. I don't know. It's like walking down the street and find a $100 bill on the sidewalk or something. You're like, man, this is great. Look what I found. And so road wins in conference, especially the SEC, it's a tough place to win. You look at these. Auburn's playing real well on the road. They hammered Vandy, and they obviously won in Fayetteville. But Ole Miss has been a really good team. They went to Tennessee and got handled. LSU beat them last night in Baton Rouge. Of course, LSU went to College Station and won. So, but yeah, I think South Carolina's going to come in here very motivated. Very excited to play, and Arkansas better be able to match that. They should. They certainly can't relax. Oh wow. We beat A&M. They got a lot more work to do. And I do think if this start, I would think Eric would probably start the same lineup. Maybe there'll be different matchups. But I think whoever he's got out there, if they're not, it's one thing to miss a shot, but if they're not, going to the boards, if they're not rotating, if they're not hustling back, they're going to be out of there. I think he's going to have a very quick hook. And I think guys probably understand that. And so, sometimes you think you're playing hard and you're really not. And so I think these guys, for their sake, hopefully now understand the level it's going to take to play in the SEC, and they're going to play with a sense of urgency, a sense of desperation. Not always a bad thing, be on edge a little bit, be concerned about playing time. Hey, if I want to earn my minutes, I better go out there and earn them. They're not going to be given to me. And maybe there was a sense of entitlement earlier. I think that's gone.
Well, we will have a much better feel this time next week whenever we sit down and talk again about maybe if that Texas A&M game was the start of, just a good ride of momentum for the Razorbacks. By the time we'll talk next week, they'll have played South Carolina. That's this Saturday. Then they travel to Ole Miss, that's ranked right now number 22. They're traveling to them next Wednesday. I doubt they'll be ranked after the loss to LSU. Maybe Arkansas will be going and traveling to a ranked team next Wednesday. But the next time we sit down, I think we'll have a much better feel of if Tramon Mark's game winner against Texas A&M might have been the start of righting the ship. But as for now, I'm Ethan Westerman. Was happy to be joined by Bob Holt and Blake Sutton as always. Thanks for listening to the Basketball Podcast of Mid-America.